So we'll go ahead and get started. Like I said, this training is, of course, to give you an overview of how to use the new reporting software, which is Telerik. It's going to replace the existing software inside of RMS, which is Fast Reports, which you currently use to create your custom reports in RMS. So with that said, I will turn it over to Benita. I'm not sure who on your team is briefing that when Telerik goes live, we will not immediately cut off Fast Reports. We will allow some overlap between the two so that you're not, dead in the water where you wake up one day and your reports are just gone and now you have to try to, continue to manage your projects or your contracts without something. As far as how long the overlap will be, the PMO is still evaluating that to see what we think a decent time frame would be to allow that overlap. But I just want to throw that out there so that nobody's worried about not having something when they might need it. So with that, Benita, I will turn it over to you and your team.
Thank you. We're going to have Ryan Holland be our presenter this afternoon. Before we get started, I wanted to make sure everyone understood there's no need for you to attend training every day. The hour-and-a-half training is going to be identical every day this week, and it's intended to be able to reach the different users community at different levels because we've got such a large community. It's important also to understand that when considering what custom reports you need converted from Fast Reports to Telerik, it may be less work if we take time to consider how often I currently use some of the Fast Reports custom reports. If we're really not using them, if they're one and done, then we may not want to put the energy into doing that, but that's the individual's, choice, how they want to manage that report for them. Just trying to make it a little less work for you. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and let Ryan introduce himself and get you started. And I appreciate you all coming.
Awesome. My name is Ryan Holland. I'm one of the developers at the RMS Support Center. So let's go ahead and jump straight into Telerik, and I'll note some of the differences between Fast Reports and Telerik and show you how to create a couple custom reports. We're going to go through a contract custom report and a district custom report together here. So custom reports, only government users can create custom reports. Custom reports are limited in the district library. If you go in the district library, when creating custom reports, you'll be in two specific modules. The first will be this custom reports module. This is where all the templates are held. This will be the area for both Fast Reports and Telerik. We'll show you how they're separated in just a second. The other module that you'll be working in with custom reports, specifically district custom reports, will be this query definitions module. This is an area where users can create queries to run across our databases to pull data from your specific district. And so it's a real helpful tool there. The queries that were already made for Fast Reports will actually work for Telerik. So there's no need to create another query definition if you've already made that for your custom report. And we'll show you how that works in just a second. And so that's one really great thing that we have there, is that you don't have to rebuild your custom queries to retrieve your data sets. So let's go ahead and just jump straight in here. We're going to go to the custom reports area. And right off the bat, you'll see all the Fast Report templates. There's nothing in Telerik here quite yet. We wanted to separate the two. That way you can run them side by side. So when you recreate your custom reports, you can run them together, see what data fields that you need, and then bring them to Telerik and design your report template in that way. To get to the Telerik reports, all you have to do is click on this button in the right-hand corner, and then it'll prompt you to click OK. And then you'll see that you're now in a new data grid, and this contains all of the Telerik report templates. Nothing of Fast Reports is in this set. You can change between the two using that button right there. So let's go ahead and add a custom report. I'm just going to go ahead and add one here. And nothing has changed too drastically here on our report edit view. There's a couple differences, and I'll note those in just a second. But for those of you who are not familiar with the Fast Reports edit view, I'll just go ahead and walk through that a little bit as well, of what this view does and how it pertains to the custom reports. So the very first thing that you have is your report title. You can also enter in the author's name of the report. Then we have this drop-down selection for our report type. Custom reports can be ran in either two places. They can be ran at the contract level within the contract reports module, or they can be ran on the district level in the summary reports module. And once when you create your custom report, you can actually see the custom report that you've created in either of these modules, depending on which report type that you select. I'm going to go ahead and start with our contract report type. We have another drop-down area for our report menu. This is to select the group descriptor. It's those groupings that you see within the summary report area and the contract report area. And it's just a really helpful way of grouping your reports together and organizing them into kind of these little folders. You see them in contract file, and then again, also in that summary and contract report area as well. We have a text box where you can write just a short description of what your report does. To the right of that, we have our record GUID, and this actually does play a role a little bit when it comes to Telerik. So our Telerik reports, when you launch the Telerik Report Designer, we do a little bit different things under the hood. And one of those things that we do is that we actually grab the report template and we bring it down to the client's machine. And we actually bring it down here in this folder. If you can see it, it'll be RMS3 TR Reports Templates. Depending if you've replaced or changed this default setting, it'll be in C drive program files, but it'll always end in this way. And so we actually store the template files on the client's machine, and then once when you're done and you're ready to save it, we'll bring it back up to our database where you can pull and bring in and modify your template there. But this is a great handy way. You can actually edit these offline. You can actually save these. You can make backups. You can actually send these to other people within your district that they want to modify something really quickly. And so a neat little tool that we added there for Telerik. Right below our record GUID, we have these three flags, and these three flags determine what you'll see within the contract and summary report area. So while this is marked under construction, you'll actually see a text that says, hey, I'm still working on this report. Don't come into this report quite yet. And then you can actually set this report to show it in government mode or contractor mode, or you can show them in both, depending on what your report does and depending on who you want to actually preview that specific report. Down below that, we have our required collections, and this is actually a little bit different compared to Telerik. We actually have tied this area into the report type that you have. So when you actually click this, you'll see a lookup of collections that are available. This actually changes. There are contract level collections and there's district level collections. The contract level collections do not contain your custom queries. Custom queries are limited to the district level only. And so that's kind of a good note to have there. That's one of the big differences that we have between Telerik and Fast Reports is that this report type actually plays a role into these required collections. The other thing that's different between Telerik and Fast Reports is that you can actually use contract collections now. Before in Fast Reports, contract collections never actually made it up to the Fast Report Designer. We fixed that issue, so now you can actually run contract collections. You can create contract reports and design those for your staff and for your users to use. And so down towards the bottom, we have a little bit of a difference between Fast Reports and Telerik as well. We have this Report Designer Contract ID. Before, this used to be just a string box or a text box where you just enter in a string for your contract ID. We changed this to a lookup. So now you can select the contract that you want to run your data against while you're designing that report. If you're making a contract report, that way you can see what your data looks like and you're not running against the entire district. We also added this other field right below it, RMS Customs Collection Fields. And this is actually a really new feature that we had. We had a request for the contract status sheet to make that an asset in the asset store, so that's now available in there. When you click this, you can actually use, we have these custom collections. In this case, they're the actual contract status graphs, so that you can use those on your custom reports when you select this. And there's also a query on our system queries that you can use if you want to make a contract status sheet report. To the right of that, we have our 3 buttons, Launch Telerik Report Designer. That will launch the report designer. There's no need to download anything from Telerik. Everything's already preloaded for you in the patch when this is released out with Telerik. Right below that, we have a button to copy the report template. So you can copy any of the report templates that we've made here at the RMS Center. Now, this function only copies the template itself. It doesn't copy the data over. The data sets that the developers use is different than the ones that are in our custom reports. The ones to our custom reports are mapped to our database directly, where the developers, we have custom fields and some generated in code and things like that. So there are some differences there. The next one is our copy report template from an end user report. This is a handy way if someone made a really nice report that you just want to tweak it a little bit, you can copy someone else's report. This is limited to just the Telerik reports, same as the other copy report. You can only copy the Telerik reports when you're in this Telerik design report edit view. So let's go ahead and just dive right in. We're going to go ahead and make a report, and we're going to make a report that mimics the RFI screen. I'm going to go ahead and pop that open right over here. We're going to go ahead and mimic some of the data that's on this screen. I'm just going to mimic these first 3 fields that we have here when building our custom report. So the very first thing to do when you're building a custom report is to figure out what data set do you need. And a great handy way to do that is to go into the screen that you're looking at that data. You know, for instance, this one's just the RFI screen. And we have this handy tool. If you hit Control right click, you'll actually see a new UI layer pop up. This UI layer shows you the data set that we use, or rather the table name, which is RFI_KTR. And then you can also see the fields that are in that specific table. And so you can actually use all of these fields from this specific table. There are a few fields that you can't use, and you can note that by this _X. This is for developers only. I kind of mentioned it earlier. Sometimes we create fields on the fly in our code that's not accessible to our database, so that's why those are there, and that's why we can't bring those into our custom reports area. So anyway, now that I know what table I'm going to use for my report, I'm going to go ahead and pop back to the designer area. I'll go ahead and run these side by side. Hopefully that's not too small for you guys. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and add my collection. So I'm going to go ahead and search for that table name, RFI_KTR. I'm going to select OK. And now I'm going to go ahead and launch the Telerik Report Designer. So like I said, no need to download anything. The Telerik Report Designer is included in our release, and so there's no need to download anything. Once when you click on Launch Report Designer, you'll see that a new template is brought up. This is like a boiler base to just go ahead and create your templates. This happens every time that you create a new Telerik report. You'll get this table, you'll get this header, and then all these text boxes. So the designer looks fairly similar to fast reports. There are definitely some big differences. We'll see those once when we get into data binding and actually getting our data to be able to preview in a report format. And so that'll be a big difference. But here we have our report area where we can interact with our report objects. You can increase the size of your text boxes. You can change the text. Really kind of the same features that you would see in fast reports. At the top, we have our toolbar, and this toolbar changes depending on what tab you're on. While you're on the Home tab, you'll see a lot of formatting tools, very similar to Microsoft Word. You have some layout tools that you have that you can bring things forward, backwards. You can align things horizontally and vertically. There are also some tools, some formatting tools for your borders as well. Let's go ahead and go to the right here. Sorry, got some WebEx stuff there. All right, to the right of that, we have our Data Explorer. Our Data Explorer shows the data sets that are within that specific report template that you're working on. In this case, we have 2 data sets, and I'll explain those in just a second. There's also another tab right here that is our Report Explorer. This shows you all the objects within your report, and you can actually click on these, and you'll see that it highlights a different item here on the report interface. And this is a great way to interact with the report. If you need to find something really quickly, you can use the Report Explorer. Down below that, we have our Properties window, and this is a super useful window. I use it all the time when creating reports. You'll see all the properties for the report items that you have selected. And so each report item is different. They have different properties. Some have more, some have less. And you can see those differences as you select them. You'll see them change. And this is a great, really way to interact with those report objects. We'll interact with our tables in just a second. To the left of that, you can see the data sources that are in your report currently. Right now, we just have one data source, which is a JSON data source, which we have named RMS_data source. Below that, we have our Group Explorer. Telerik makes it pretty easy to make groups for your data sets, and this is a great way to filter and to sort things. This Group Explorer changes depending on what you have selected. So if I click outside of that table, you'll see there's no group there. If I click this table, you'll see a group appear. The report itself actually has properties as well, and you can see that if you click away from this report canvas area as well, and you can change things like the page settings. You can change it if you want it to be portrait, landscape. You could also change the size of your paper. You can also change the margins. All right. Going to the next tab, when you click on the Insert tab, you'll see our toolbar at the top changes. And this is where all of the report objects are for Telerik. And so we have a couple different report objects. We got some tables, we have some charts, and then we have some report items that are very similar to what Fast Report has. We have text boxes, picture boxes, panels, and check boxes. And I'll show you how to interact with some of the text boxes in just a second as well. The next tab is our Data tab. This is where you would set your data source. We actually do that for you, which is one of the other differences that Telerik does compared to Fast Reports. Fast Reports, you had to actually set your own data source once when you got to the designer. We actually do that for you. We use a JSON data source, and we connect that directly for you. So there's no need to really do anything on this specific tab, but just to show you. All right. Let's go ahead and start getting some data into our report. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the Data Explorer and talk about this just for a second. So one of the things that you might have noticed is that we have 2 data sets in here. We have the RFI_KTR collection, which is the collection that I added in the screen before we got into the designer. And then we have this object called RMS_contract. And this is added to all the templates when you're in the report designer. This changes based on your report type. If you switch to a district, you'll see, I think it's RMS_district. And what this is this is an object that you can use to set your headers. And it's very similar to Fast Reports. It's got a little drop down where you can see the properties within that particular object. I'm going to go ahead and scroll down to the contract ID. And you can actually drag it down and bring it onto the report. I'm going to remove these and show you what the preview looks like, and you'll see the contract that I selected earlier, 1660. And one of the things that you might have noticed is that this has a drop down to see the properties, but the collection that we added doesn't. And this is one of the things that Telerik, I think, does a little bit poorly, kind of one of the cons that Telerik has compared to Fast Reports, and that is that Telerik doesn't know how to look at the properties within a list or a collection. So any collections or queries that you add, you won't actually be able to see the properties. You won't be able to drag these fields down. I'll show you exactly how to actually get the data into your report. You have to do this for all your tables, all your collections, and all your queries that you bring on. There's a couple ways around this, and I'll show you both. So let's go ahead and do the first way to bind your data. And the first way that you can bind your data and get the properties to show on your report is to get an object that is a table object. So that would be either a table, cross table, or a list. these objects had a property called data source, and that data source notifies the Telerik report engine, hey, I need to iterate through a list, right? I need to look at the properties. And so by binding it to a data set, it knows, okay, I'm looking for some properties in a list. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to select my table. And in the properties window to the right, I'm going to find this area for data. And I'm going to click on this property called bindings. And it's going to open up a new window. The bindings window is a really, really great tool for the report objects that I think Telerik does super well. This binding areas allows you to select any properties that report object has, and you can bind it to an expression. So for instance, if you wanted to bind the background color to an expression, you can do that. If you're working with a dollar amount, if you want it to be green when it's a certain amount or red, you can do that with these bindings, and it's a really helpful tool. You have all the properties there that you can change for that object and bind it to some sort of expression with your data set. And so very, very helpful tool that Telerik, I think Telerik does really well in my opinion. So going back to getting our data to our table, I'm going to go ahead and find the property data source, and I'm going to bind it to our collection. And our collection again is RFI_KTR, and I'm going to go ahead and select OK. So again, one of the things that Telerik does poorly compared to fast reports is that it doesn't show you the properties or fields names. So one of the ways that you can enter data into your table and preview it is to actually run two instances like I have here and write down the fields names that you want for that specific table. So Telerik uses a syntax. I believe fast reports did as well. I can't remember off the tip of my head what their syntax was. But Telerik uses a syntax when it's trying to display a data set, and it uses the syntax fields period. And then it looks for the property name of the collection that it's bounded to. So in this case, let's say I wanted to just display these first three fields. All I'd have to do is use that syntax equals fields period, and then I would just use the field name. In this case, I'd use date submitted. And then in this one, I would use RFI number. Let's scroll over, and then I'm going to use equals fields.RFI subject. All right. And now if I preview that report, I should be able to see that data from 1660. Oh, I think I must have had a typo there. Let's see here. There we go. So now I can see the data from that specific contract, 1660. And it looks okay. Once when you preview it, you'll see that your data actually displays on one page, one continuously long page. If you want to see what it looks like on a PDF, they have a print preview mode where you'll actually see it start changing pages, which is really helpful to see what you want your report to actually look like. So some of the things that you might have already noticed right off the top is that our formatting is a little off for dates. Telerik has some great tools for formatting. I'll go ahead and cover those, and then I'll show you the other way that you can bind data and actually see those properties. It can get a little confusing. I know it seems like a lot, but I promise you once when you're in Telerik, it'll start to make sense once when you get to use it a little bit. So let's go ahead and fix our two issues. We're going to fix our formatting, and then we're going to fix our header. We're going to have our header repeat on every page. Right now it's missing. There's actually a property on the table objects that we need to set in order for it to print on every page. So I'm going to go ahead and fix the headers first. So I'm going to go ahead and select the table. And I'm going to scroll down to our layout settings. And there's a property that the table objects have that is called column headers print on every page. This is by default always set to false. If you set this to true, the headers will then print on every page. Kind of a little note there, sometimes I forget to do that as well, that it's always set to a default to false, so make sure you set that to true. The other thing that we want to fix is the formatting, and so if we want to fix the formatting, there's formatting for text objects. In order to do that, you can right-click on the text object that you want to format, and then find format. Very similar to what fast reports did. Actually, I think they have a little bit better formatting options than fast reports. They have some numbering formatting options, currency, date, time, percentages, scientific, and they actually have some custom formatting, which I think they do a really good job. You can do custom formatting for numeric or date time, and you can actually see them here, and you can change them around and see a little preview right here in this little window. In this case, I'm just going to set it to the default date and time. So now when I preview it, we see that the time is cut off. We're just left with the month, the day, and the year for our specific report. All right. So quite a bit to throw at you all at once. Let's go ahead and go through the other method of getting data to your report. There's another way that is a little more similar to fast reports that I think you might like. So I'm going to go ahead and show you that. Now, because we're using a JSON data source, we have the ability to use what's called a data selector. This is actually a JSON syntax, and what this does is it allows you to drill into the scope of the list that you want to go into. So, for example, if I wanted to see the fields, let's go ahead and go to the Data Explorer. If I wanted to see a drop-down like this object here for RMS contract, I would have to use a data selector. In order to use Data Selector, what you have to do is right-click on the JSON data source and select Configure. This is going to pop up a window. You're going to see the JSON file for your specific report. And what you have to do is just set the selector. This is a JSON syntax $period. And what you have to do is type in the name of the collection, query, or list that you really want to see those properties in, that you want to drill in on. And what this is going to do, it's going to notify Telerik and say, hey, I want to see these properties, and it's going to go inside the scope of this specific collection. So when I click Finish, I'm going to see now the properties for that collection that we had for RFIs. Now, one of the things that you might have noticed is that the other objects disappeared. This is kind of one of the drawbacks of using data selectors, is that it goes into the scope of that collection, meaning that everything outside of that, Telerik won't be able to see it until you remove that data selector. So one of my recommendations is that when you're building your reports is to actually use the data selectors for the collections that you're using. Build your tables that you want, and then bind them like we did before. I'm going to show you exactly what I mean. So I'm going to remove this table, and then I'm going to go to Insert. And I'm going to use Telerik's table wizard to build the table this time. I'm going to select the JSON data source, and I'm just going to go through the wizard that they have here. It's going to ask me what fields do I want to add to my table. I'm going to go ahead and add those same fields. Let's see here. I forgot what those fields were. I believe it was date submitted, RFI number, and RFI subject. All right. So I'm going to add the date submitted field. And all you have to do is select the field and click this little plus icon. And then you just have to do that for the fields that you want. And Telerik will actually build the table for you. So now when I click Next, there's a couple options for presentation, how you want that table to look. I'm just going to go ahead and use this Office one. Now I'm going to click Next and hit Finish. And now I have my table object. And, ooh, that went a little bit big. Let's go ahead and fix that. So now if I were to preview my report, let's go ahead and do that. So now when I preview my report, I'll actually see the RFI collection, even though I didn't bind it to a table. One of the things that you'll notice is that you won't be able to see that contract ID in the header anymore because we're using that data selector. The scope is now set within that specific table. So it does not see anything outside of that. It makes a lot of sense when you start messing with it and start playing with it. It does take a lot longer when you use the data selectors. It's going through each field. I'm going to actually stop it because I did forget that. I should have made a mental note. It actually goes through each field, and so it's bringing that data for each field to generate that specific report. I'll show you how to bind the report with the data selector there. Go ahead and click Stop. Go back to Design. Sorry, should have definitely made a mental note there. So right now, I'm going to bind my table like I did earlier, but I'm going to remove my data selector so I can see that header at the top. So I'm going to go back. Oh, that was a little quick. Let me do it one more time. I'm going to right-click on RMS data source and select Configure. And then I'm going to remove the data selector. And then I'm going to right-click on RMS data source and select Configure. And then I'm going to right-click on RMS data source and select Configure. And then I'm going to remove the data selector. And then I'm going to right-click on RMS data source and select Configure. And then I'm going to remove the data selector. And then I'm going to right-click on RMS data source and select Configure. And then I'm going to remove the data selector. And then I'm going to right-click on RMS data source and select Configure. And then I'm going to remove the data selector. And then I'm going to right-click on RMS data source and select Configure. And then I'm going to remove the data selector. And then I'm going to right-click on RMS data source and select Configure. And then I'm going to remove the data selector. And then I'm going to right-click on RMS data source and select Configure. And then I'm going to remove the data selector. And then I'm going to right-click on RMS data source and select Configure. And then I'm going to remove the data selector. And then I'm going to right-click on RMS I'm going to run through the wizard again, click finish, and now I'm going to see both my objects. Now I'm going to go ahead and bind my table. I'm going to use the bindings property. I'm going to select new, and I'm going to go to data source, and I'm going to select that collection again. And now I'm going to hit preview. Now we'll see the report pop up, hopefully a lot quicker. There we go. Yeah, sorry about that earlier one. Again, when you click preview with the data selector, it's going to go through each field that that collection has, and it's going to take a really, really long time. But anyway, that's one way that you can use data selectors to get your data into your report and preview it. It's kind of a little hybrid where you can use the data selector, set it, build your tables, and then go back out, remove it, and then bind your table like we did at the start. And so this is probably one of the hardest parts with working with Telerik is getting your data to appear. But like I said, it seems like a lot at first, but once when you start using it, it'll start to make sense really quickly. All right, let's go ahead and hop out. I'm going to go ahead and show you what a district report looks like and how to create one of those. So let's go ahead and close the designer. And just a quick note, anything that you save in the Telerik report designer is local. In order to actually save it to our database, you have to close the designer, and then you'll see a pop-up come up within RMS. So once when I close this, you're going to see a pop-up. And depending on if you select yes or no, this will determine if you actually saved that report. So every time that you launch the report designer, it's going to bring down what's in the database and stomp it out with whatever you have locally. So if you make some changes that you don't want, you can close out the report designer and then just don't save your design changes to the database. All right, let's go ahead and create a district report. Now, before I create a district template, I'm going to go ahead and jump to the query definitions area. I'm going to show you how to create a custom query. Uh-oh, the screen's went away. And so we're going to build a custom query for this same screen. So I'm going to go ahead and back out. And the custom queries are in the district library. So to create a custom query, all you have to do is go to the query definitions module, go in and add a custom query. Again, you don't have to create a new custom query for your fast report templates. The old ones will still work with Telerik. So there's no need to create another custom query. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and make a new query. I'm just going to name it RFI. So nothing has changed on this area for Telerik. Again, like I said, you can still use the same queries that you made for fast reports, but we'll go ahead and just go through it a little bit. So we have our title of our query. You can add a description of your query. And then right here in this box, this is where the actual text of your SQL for your query that you want to run across your district. And so I'm going to go ahead and click on this little icon so we can get a little more screen real estate. And I prepared a query for us beforehand, so I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste that. But I'll go ahead and walk through it. So right now I'm using a select statement to grab our first three fields that we used in our report: date submitted, RFI number, and RFI subject. And I'm grabbing them from that table, RFI_KTR. And I'm actually joining these other two tables, contract and offices, based on the contract ID that's in the RFI table and the office ID that's based in the contract table. And I'm actually going to limit this to a specific amount of rows. That way I don't grab all the RFIs within the contract, just for the sake of time, so you guys don't have to sit here and watch RMS spin grabbing all the RFIs in this specific district. So I'm going to go ahead and select OK. One of the things that you might have noticed is that there is a special syntax that I have here in this where clause, where office ID is. And you can actually pass in parameters for your custom queries. And in order to pass in a parameter, what it does is it looks for this syntax with a colon, and then it looks for the ID. So what you have to do is set an ID here in the parameters area. I'm going to set my ID has office ID, and then I'm going to set my title for office ID. And then you set the type of parameter that you want. So if you have a where clause that, in this case, I'm going to use office ID, I'm going to select string, but you can also pass in dates or integers or doubles if you want to use a data set, say on a specific day, or if you're working with a dollar amount, you can go in between two numbers in that way. You can also set a default for your query. So every time that you run a query and you add a custom query to a report, the screen, there will be a screen that pops up depending if you set these parameters. That screen will still pop up even while using a custom report. So when I execute this query, we're going to see that screen where you can enter in the office ID, which is a good way if you want to change office ID constantly. If you want to set it at a contract ID, you can do that as well. So now I'm going to go ahead and execute my query. And now I'm going to see the RFIs within this district with those three fields: the date submitted, RFI number, and RFI subject. So now I'm going to go ahead and go back to the custom reports area and use this query that I just made. So again, coming back, this is all fast reports. To get to Telerik, you have to click on this button in the right-hand corner. And now we're back in the Telerik templates. I'm going to go ahead and add another report template. You can actually change it if you want. If I wanted to go back into that old template that I just made, and I can actually change it back to district. But in this case, I'm just going to make a new one. So again, same preview screen that we had before. This time, the default is set to district, and so I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to go ahead.
Hey, Brian.
Yeah.
Quick question. So that custom query, can I have that custom query be a contract level query and a district level query, or is it only district level?
It's only district level. That's a great question.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Perfect. All right. So the report type is now on the district level. So now when I click on required collections, I'm going to see only the district level collections. I'm also going to see the custom queries that are within that module that we were just in. So now I'm going to go ahead and look for that query that I just made. And I'm going to go ahead and select OK. Now, like before, I'm going to go ahead and launch the Telerik Report Designer. And then so here we are again. And then, like I said before, we always upload another object with the data set that you add in that required collections. In this case, we have the RMS _ district essentials. This is just, again, for header information. If you wanted to add the district name like we have for our summary reports, it's a great tool for that. I'm going to go ahead and bind our table again. We're going to see the same report that we built with the contract report. So I'm going to go ahead and go to bindings. I'm going to go to new for our property path. Then I'm going to select data source. Now I'm going to go to our expression, and I'm going to go ahead and select the collection that we just added for RFIs. So now again, you can use either the data selectors to show those properties and drag them in, or use the Telerik wizard. In this case, I'm just going to use that syntax that I showed you beforehand, and then build the same report that we had beforehand. Uh-oh, I get no data. Let's see here. Did I set the bindings? Let me make sure. That looks about right. Maybe I don't have anything in that office. Let's go back. My data source is set here. Let's see here. I don't think I had any data in that office. Let me go ahead and come back out real quick. Sorry about that, guys. I think a space got in on that query that I had. Look at that. Launch it again. There we go.
Hey, Ryan, you have another request from someone who wants to know if you can show them an example of two queries in a data collection and establish a child relationship.
Sure. Go ahead. So in order to get two tables, if you want a relationship, you actually have to go into the custom query area, and you have to build that relationship there. Telerik only allows you to iterate through a list one at a time. So for example, on this table, I can only have this bounded to one data source. So in this case, if I had another, or if I had another table, I can only bind this one list there, if that makes sense. Yeah, and that's correct. The fields ending in underscore X are programmer fields. So let me go ahead and go back to this. That's bounded, date submitted, preview this. Well, I'm not sure why the data is not showing up. Let me go back in. I think I know the problem now. I had uppercase on my query. Yeah, that's probably what it is. Date submitted. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so that's one thing to note too. If you capitalize the field names in your custom query, Telerik is actually expecting you to match that custom query as well. So if you look here, you can see that these two fields don't show up because I was lowercasing them here in the designer. So now if I capitalize these, you'll actually be able to see these data sets. Sorry about that. So now you can see we have the same report that we had before, but now this is on a district level. That's about all I have in terms of report designing. Paul, Bonita, I don't know if you guys wanted to open the floor for questions.
Yes, we do want to open the floor for questions.
Okay.
Did we answer the question on the parent-child query?
Yes. Are you talking for a query or within the Telerik designer? So in the Telerik report designer, you can't have a relationship with two different tables in the actual designer. If you wanted to add one in a custom query, then we can do that with a key field. I'm going to pop up the chat here.
I guess I was looking for, like, so for some, like, say I've got a query and then there's another query that maybe has the project manager's name, so I could just, tie that without putting them all into one query. It's I guess in fast reports it was parent-child relationships.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, I see. Yeah, you would have to put it in one query if you want it from a different table. Like, for example, if you wanted to do like a group down here with a child, then you would have to put it in one query. Now you can use different queries with different tables to actually be shown on the report. That answers your question.
I guess I'm not sure. I may have to show you something specifically that I was doing. I guess for some things, like say if I have some type of report, I got like maybe 3 or 4 contracts, and then maybe I'm working with a submittal register, and then I want to pull like all the open submittals for those 5 contracts. I mean, I wouldn't create like one query with that. I'd have a couple of queries and then link those together with those relationships. So how do you?
Oh,
I need to be able to establish those relationships between those 2 queries or multiple queries. I mean, there could be multiple parent-child relationships.
So I think one way that you can do that, I'd probably have to look a little bit more at that specific example, but Telerik has these report parameters, and you can actually set these parameters as data fields. So like you can do a key for like the submittal number. You can actually add a key there, and then with that, you can filter down to, it would be a transmittal, right? You can put a transmittal number, and then put that as a key, and then within the table, put a submittal. If that makes sense.
So if that doesn't answer your question, we can take an action to provide a direct answer to you because we don't want to leave you hanging.
Yeah.
We don't have all the answers, then we're going to make sure we can research them and find the answers for you.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate it. So maybe another example is the like the namings, right? So there's certain tables you've got like a code for like the project engineer, and then you have to go to another table to actually get that project engineer's name. And to do that, you got to establish that parent-child relationship. So like their their code might be E00015,000, and then you link that to the code in that other table where the names are actually located. So I can get the actual last name, first name, that type of thing.
Gotcha. I see what you're saying. I would probably have to look at it a little bit more to do it outside of another table within the Telerik Report Designer. I think going that report parameters could do it, but I don't want to give you the wrong information. I do see what you're saying, though. I would say probably if possible, do your relationships within the query, but I do understand that, for certain reports, depending on how you want that report displayed, you would want separate queries and separate tables. All right. Got any other questions?
We're reading the chat to make sure we don't miss anything. We had a question earlier that James attempted to answer, and we want to follow up to make sure that we got the right answers. They were asking whether the queries were district or contract related. And James was giving them information on how to change the query so that it could be focused on the contracts they wanted.
Yeah, so you can put in a where clause if you want it to run on a specific contract, but the report can only be ran at the district level. So it can only be ran in summary reports, if that makes sense. So for example, let's go ahead and back out of this just real quickly so you can see the screen. So when I launched this, I had a query that had a where clause with the office ID. You can set one for the contract ID to run it on a specific contract level, but you can't actually run a custom query inside the contract module.
So I had that question. So you've got the contract feature kind of available to us now, or what it looked like. So I was doing all the custom reporting at the district level before. So, but when you set that report type to contract, and then you select the collection name, where are those coming from?
So we have a specific, I shouldn't even say specific. We have table sets that run in the scope of that contract. So you can actually create, these are directly mapped to our database. We have custom objects that drill into the scope of the contract, if that makes sense. So that when you're in that contract, you don't see district information. These are coming from different screens. These are actual tables within our database, if that makes sense.
It does. So I can't add a query at the contract report.
Right. Yeah, because of that scope creep for the district, where you can, write a query that runs across the district, if that makes sense.
Okay, so these are fixed. This is a fixed collection or a set of collections, and we can't add anything here at a contract level report. Okay.
Correct.
All right.
So contract status sheet. Yeah, so we actually added a new item in the asset store. Let me go ahead and go there. Let's see, your system library. So we added a new asset store item that you can actually download from the district. That lookup that I showed you earlier notifies the report engine to bring in the graphs of the status of the construction. Those two graphs are actually built using a different component outside of the Telerik reporting tool. So that's why we had to pass those in. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Can you show us how to start with an existing summary level report and make adjustments? We use slightly modified versions of reports, such as status of contract. That's a big one, huh?
Yeah, that one would take some time to set up.
Okay. All right. So how would you, since that takes time to set up and we don't have that set up, I guess we have to prepare a setup for that and communicate back with Carrie so that we can show you that information.
Yeah, what I would recommend is actually to use this asset to go into the system reports and copy this asset. And then when you actually copy this, it'll actually bring it to the Telerik custom reports. Let me go ahead and go out and go to District Library, Custom Reports. So I have just copied that one there, and you can see that that collection is now set there. Grab an office.
Hey, Ryan, do those
Yes.
copy report templates work, or is that a carryover from Fast Reports?
So they work only for Telerik reports. So you can only copy the Telerik versions of our reports, but it's only the template. The data sources won't come over.
So,
And they're asking us to do the copy again, just FYI, a little bit slower this time.
Oh, yeah, I can run through that again.
I'm going to add two things to the list as well. Making sure we show them how they can pull one up and compare and get it, walk through the process, pull a past report custom up and walk through the process so that they know that they can run two at a time, and making sure they understand where the components of past reports are going to come from, how to log and set up their system. Does that make sense, Ryan?
Gotcha. Sorry, this is taking quite a while. I think there was a lot in that office that I added for the contract status, reports or summary reports. Let me show you the report that I copied, and then I'll show you how to copy the report since it took a while. So this is the asset that I just copied. You can see that it looks just like the contract status. That field notifies the report to grab these two or these three pictures. These are graphs, and then this is the contract status sheet. So you can actually copy that asset store item and then come in and actually tweak these things. If you wanted to add a couple fields, you can do that, and you can run it with your own query. Right now, it's using the one from the district or from the system collection that copied over when you actually copy it from the asset store. So let me go ahead and show you how to copy it from the asset store one more time. So the asset store is in the system library, RMS asset store, and then contract status. Oops. This one came straight from the RMS center. You can tell by this RMS asset or this asset type. So I'm going to go ahead and enter it here. And now I'm going to click copy this asset to the RMS district. And now another copy of this has now been added to that Telerik list. So now if I come out of here, I'll actually see another copy of this report. This will probably say 4 now. Oh, I think I copied a couple more. What is your query definition name and what district? So the for the contract status, the query name is, I believe it's contract status mod details, and that's actually in the system library. We have some system level queries that we have at the RMS center that all the districts have access to. Any other questions? Did I miss anything in the chat? Bonita, Paul, did you see any that I missed?
But maybe do a conditional highlight example on a data field.
A conditional highlight? Oh, like change the color based on a condition?
Yeah, let's say it's over 30 days late or something. Yeah, you might change that to yellow or
okay.
on is red or I don't know, something like that. Yeah.
Gotcha. Let's go ahead and so I'm using that first contract report that I built. I'm going to do the RFI collections. I'll just find a day to set the color, change it there. So let me go ahead and preview this real quick. All right, let's say I don't know, we'll change the color of the text box for all the dates submitted that are before 3/25/21. So let's go ahead, and what I'll do is I'll highlight the text box that I want that condition to be on. I'm going to go to the bindings area, and I'm going to select it. Now I'm going to click new. And then I'm going to scroll down to style.background color. And now I'm going to set that condition. So I'm going to use fields dot, let's see here, date submitted is less than 3/25. I'm not sure if this will compare it correctly on a date. Let me see. Hopefully. Okay, it's thinking it's an integer right now. Let's see here. Let me go back to bindings. Let me actually pull up an amount. Let me get a collection that has an amount, and we'll go from there. All right, we'll do the subcontractors amount. So I'm going to go out here. Sorry, I'm going to set up a report that has a dollar amount. They're a little easier to work with. KTR desk. All right, let me go ahead and create that table real quick. So I'm going to bind it to that new collection that I added, that dollar amount, and then I'm going to use those fields for that table. So same process, just equals fields, and then I'm going to use the field names. Full name. And then this, I'm going to use the work amount. And I ignore this one for now. All right, let me do that conditional property. So I'm going to select bindings. I'm going to select the new, and then I'm going to find the style background color. And then I'm going to go to expression. And then I am going to go to, I think it's functions. Yeah, text. So Telerik has some if-else statements inside of it. Let's see here. Is it in text? Might be in a report. Logical. And logical. They have some if statements in here. So I'm going to set the expression, in this case, that work amount. If it's less than 0, I'll set the value to a color, to red or to green. So in this case, I'm going to say fields dot work amount is less than 0. Make it green. If not, make it red. Now I'm select OK. Preview the screen. So now you can see it changed to red. Let's see here. I don't think I have anything less than 0. Make it less than 5. So now you can see it changes the colors based on that property.
Yeah, that's good. So on that first one on the date, so you the wrong, or the field was the type of the field. Was that the problem there?
Yeah, it was the type of the field. I forget the exact formatting that you have to compare for it, for dates. Let me see if I can run that with on the dates. I guess that's not a date field. But yeah, that was the problem. So trying to think.
So it's a string, what you got there?
Yeah, or what I had before was a date. This one right here is actually a double.
No, double, yeah. So that first one was a, where can you see what type of field that is? text box or no?
I don't know if Telerik actually shows you the type of it. Let me see. Yeah, I don't think it does. That is a good question.
Do you have like the to-date function or something, or is it to make it a date?
Let's see here. Format. They do have a couple conversion format. Sorry, they do have a couple different formatting options. So functions, they have some conversions. So yeah, to date, see date.
It's an express to design. Okay.
So on that first one, I could have probably put that value in there, and then it converted it to a date instead of that integer that I put in first. And then it would have compared it there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Oh, James said that you can see the field types on one of the reports that we have in the summary report area for data dictionary. So that actually shows you the types of the fields. I could go ahead and run that.
Yeah, it's just it can get a little confusing because some of the things that look like dates are actually string, some are actually date types.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just it's a real mix. So yeah.
Yeah, it can be definitely hard. Telerik will tell you if it's not that type, so you can at least change it with that. Usually with dates, if it's not a date, it'll be a string.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I'll throw another one out there if nobody else. How about like the dialog box from Fast Reports inside the report?
Yeah, Telerik actually does not have dialog boxes like Fast Reports where you're able to go up there and create a dialog box. The closest thing to that would be the query screens that we have with the parameters where you can set, the contract ID or office ID.
So I won't be able to set a parameter on the fly then, I guess.
So you can set parameters, but there's no dialog for a user, if that makes sense. So there's no pop-up other than the custom query screen right beforehand, before you execute the report.
Yeah, so that's more of a fixed parameter.
Yeah.
So there's no dialogue, huh? So...
No. Let's go ahead and run back to Telerik.
It's kind of nice just to, instead of having to type in that parameter, I could just select it from a list.
Gotcha.
Or I could set the different, there's a date tool for like start end date. You could just select it from the date tool and Fast Reports.
Yeah, Telerik does have a few less options than Fast Reports, and the dialogues are one of them. These are all the report objects that you can interact with Telerik.
So is there also like the other one had a template setting for I could create my TRB sides directly from Fast Reports, so it had like a background that I could set kind of below it. I could put like a little border around it.
So there are page settings. You can change. So if I select here, you can see the properties of the actual whole report itself. And so right here, I could change the style of what the color is, the background as well, the border width and border style. You can add those as well. if that answers that. Right, you're talking about the whole report itself.
Yeah, so I could put like I guess it was like a report overlay. It was called an overlay in there.
Yeah. So they don't have the equivalent of the overlay, but I believe you can add the border completely to it. Let's see here, default. Yeah, so you can add the whole border right here in the styles in this property area. So this is on the entire report itself. So there's no overlay, but you still have that same ability.
Hmm. Then you got one data band there. Could you put multiple data bands on this?
Yeah, so you can add, they don't call them data bands in Telerik, they actually call them groups, but you can add multiple groups, and you can bind it to different collections. Yeah, it's very similar to fast reports.
Okay. So data bands are groups. Good to know.
Yeah. You'll still have to do the same thing with the tables where, you add the tables and bind the data in that same manner. Looks like we got another question. Could you pass part of the query definition query anything to include border style and then have Telerik-based things on the user-defined field so the table fills into the groups? So the query definitions only relate directly to the database. So it'll only prompt for those specific parameters. So if you want a contract ID, you can pass in a parameter that's marked as contract ID for string. And that only affects the data set itself, not the Telerik report template.
Put a total or a subtotal for a column?
I do believe that they do have totals. Let me see here. Most of their tools are in the expression. So if you right-click a text box, you can highlight expression. Then you can go to functions. I think they might have their totals in the text area, maybe. Let's see here. They have count, conversion, data. So you can't create totals like fast reports where you would actually see an object to the right, if that's what you're referring to. But you can sum up things and you can round things. They have all these math functions here.
I guess fast reports had like group footers, and then you could create a total for the column. Like say you had 5 contracts, 1 million each. Then in that group footer, you could put, and it would total up and show $5 million.
Yeah. So let's see here. You can group things here in the table. So if I add a group out here, and then you can add. Oh, this is the RFI table. Let me see if I can get that other table that had that dollar amount. You can actually add that sum function down to the bottom. You won't get a total object like you did in fast reports where you could bring it down, but you can add that extra grouping, and then outside of that, you can add your sum for that specific field, if that makes sense. Let's see if I can pop open that report. Let's see here. It might be this one. Oh, that's contract status. All right, so on this one, I'm going to add that work amount on that screen here, and then I'm going to see if I can total up kind of the same way that fast reports did. Let's go ahead and bind that to JTR desk, and I'm just going to ignore these two fields. I'm going to use that dollar amount that I have. So one way that you can total it is go to insert row, and then you can add a group outside of that table. And so now it'll group things kind of like how you had those group footer bands. You can do it in this way, and then you can use that expression to sum up things. So if I go to expressions, functions, and then go to math, and then go to sum, we have sum. They didn't put it in math.
There they are. Yeah, I think aggregates. Go back. There was count, first, max, min, sum. There it is.
Oh, there we go.
At the bottom. Mm-hmm.
I don't know why they put it there, not math. Oh, and then field stop work amount. Let me make that a different color too, so we can see the difference. So yeah, you still get your totals there. And then if you wanted to do a grouping, you could do the same thing. You can add a group that filters on specific things, you know, similar to fast reports. So like, you know, you can have your subtotals and then a grand total.
Yep, it's very useful. Yeah, thanks. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great question.
Hey, Ryan, quick question. Do the groups stop the tables from continuing further on the page if you put the table in a grouping?
Do the group, can you repeat that one more time?
Sure. Do the groups stop the tables from continuing further on the page, like overrunning the page if you put the table in a grouping?
Put the table in a grouping.
So does it overrun the page? Melissa, I'm not sure if I'm asking your question exactly the way you intended it, but the original question was, do the groups stop the tables from continuing further on the page?
No, I don't fully understand the question though. So
yeah, sorry, I'm a kind of a new custom report user. Is a grouping like a web part where it will stop, like it'll only show up the data in the grouping in that area that it shows up on, or is that like, am I not understanding what a grouping is?
Gotcha. So a grouping by itself doesn't have any filtering or anything. You can put that on. There's filtering in in this group explorer. If you put a filter on there, then yeah, it won't show up outside of that group if that makes sense. So if you have a collection, let me actually just add a group. Let's see here. So if you add a group here, and if you filter it out, nothing outside of that will show up. Is that your question? Hopefully I'm not misunderstanding it.
So if you filter a group, you mean like it just filters data within that group? It's not like I guess I was trying to understand if it was like if I wanted to only, you know, so much data to show up on this part of the page and then stop it from showing up at the bottom of the page, would I use a grouping to do that, to like hard cut off the data at that point so it never showed up anything more than like, I don't know, say 3 inches on the page?
Oh, gotcha.
I'm seeing. I think that grouping does not do that, is what I'm gathering.
Right. I think you would have to set a property up for that to stop. I'm not even sure if you can do that. To stop it at, like, you know, if you only wanted 4 rows instead of 5, to just show 4. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, to just, I guess, control where the data shows up on the page.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, you can't control the rows itself. You can't say to stop at, you know, 4, there's 5 rows, unless you do some filtering. That would be the only way.
Okay, good to know.
Mm-hmm.
So the grouping specifically just lets you change how the data is filtered in that particular group.
Yeah, and it also separates report objects too. So if you wanted to hide
Gotcha.
a group for whatever reason, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. That makes sense.
Yeah, there is one property that the group footers do have. They have this print at bottom property where your data will always print towards the bottom of the page. But it's not quite what you were saying beforehand. You know, kind of shifts it down. Let me do one text box instead of a whole table. Yeah, you see how this one always prints on the bottom. Not quite exactly what you were talking about, but I don't know if that would get you a workaround for kind of the report that you have.
Yeah, I was more just trying to understand how groupings work. So that makes sense. Thank you.
Oh, gotcha. Perfect.
So Melissa, in this particular case, there are different things you can put within the query to prevent how much data it brings back. So that yeah.
Gotcha.
I could actually show you that query that I ran before. I specifically called a certain amount of rows. Let's see here. Go to district library. Yeah, so if you look at this query, I limited the number of rows to 150. So you can do that. Let's see here.
I believe there were some things Carrie wanted to touch on.
Okay.
Carrie, we want to make sure we don't overlook your points.
She's not able to unmute at the moment. She's listening in, but she's not able to hear in.
Okay.
So,
Gotcha.
However, I wanted to make sure that, Bonita, if you wanted to go ahead and talk about when this will go live.
The end of May is when the custom query reports will go live. All of the Telerik can reports as well, but it does not mean we're taking fast reports offline until instructed by the PMO. And as I understand it, you all are trying to make a decision based on what's best for the community group. There's one thing, let me say, the signing, Ryan, the signing of the reports inside can you explain, although we're running concurrently between fast reports and Telerik, that limitation, please?
So when you're signing a report, between fast reports and Telerik, there can be some overlay between when you're working on a fast reports report and a Telerik one. We actually added a flag. So Bonita, we actually fixed that issue. I don't know if you still want to bring that up.
Nope.
Okay, very good.
Let's not confuse things. I'm glad.
Yeah.
Okay. So did I answer your question on when we go live? We've got the sprint 15 in the middle of May, sprint 16 the end of May, and that is when everything's scheduled to go live. Barring any red flags from UAT. If there's something that our SMEs that are assisting with UAT are uncomfortable with that goes to the PMO, then different decisions may be made.
Yeah, but you're shooting for
the end of May.
Appreciate that. I also wanted to thank everybody else for coming online today. I know that there's going to be other trainings for Telerik throughout the week. You don't have to attend those because we're pretty much doing the same thing as we're doing here. But of course you can if you wanted to see it run through again and or had other questions or anything like that. So I wanted to thank everybody for coming online. You want to wrap us up, Donita?
Yes, I just wanted to follow up and make sure that we owe an answer to the parent-child relationships query to, was it Doug?
Yes, that'd be great. Yep, I appreciate it.
That's the only action I'm tracking. If I missed anything, please let me know. I appreciate you all's time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.